Good morning, class 10 students. I welcome you all on this online platform provided by Jagriti Classes. We were doing digestive system in humans, that is a part of chapter 6 of class 10th, okay? So we'll be continuing our video lecture about digestive system, and this, as you can see, is your perfect diagram given in your textbooks of digestive system. So what do we have now? We have already discussed various parts of digestive system. The first was your mouth, then we discussed about this buccal cavity, okay? Then we discussed about esophagus. Esophagus is also known as food pipe. And we also said that no kind of digestion takes place in this esophagus and food pipe. But the important feature of esophagus is peristalsis movement, that is the simultaneous relaxation and contraction of this muscular organ, which forces your food to get down until the stomach. Then we also said what are the three main interesting features of stomach. Stomach is your bag-shaped or sac-like organ. It has three major functions, that is, this stomach serves three functions. The first function was it produces HCl, which is your hydrochloric acid, and the function of HCl is to provide acidic medium. And next, this HCl is also useful to kill all the microbes which are present in your food. So this was the function of HCl. Next, an enzyme which is known as pepsin. Pepsin is secreted from this stomach, and pepsin helps. This pepsin is activated only in acidic medium which is provided by HCl. So pepsin is an enzyme which is activated in acidic medium. Therefore, HCl is required for the activation of this enzyme pepsin. And the next point, this pepsin helps in partial digestion of protein. It works on protein and digests protein to a limited extent. So it works in the partial digestion of proteins. So this was the role of pepsin. Partial here means incomplete digestion. That is, all the proteins which are present in your food are incompletely digested by pepsin into some smaller or simpler forms. And then next we'll see, when we'll deal with small intestine, that these proteins are now completely digested by other enzymes and other digestive juices. So in stomach you have partial digestion of protein. And next, a third important feature of stomach is presence of mucus. This mucus is a sticky fluid which is present along the boundary or walls, that is, you have a mucus layer along the boundary of stomach, and this mucus prevents your stomach walls from getting injured by this HCl. So mucus prevents stomach from adverse effects of acid. And which acid? HCl or hydrochloric acid. Okay, because if mucus would not be present and this HCl, if it would get in contact with your stomach walls, it would in turn burn the walls, or it would produce a inflaming sensation. So this mucus helps in the prevention of adverse effects of HCl. Okay, now next what we have is, whenever by any reason, that is, if you intake very spicy food on a daily basis or due to any other reasons, if this mucus layer gets destroyed, then what we observe is, we observe that HCl produces a burning sensation towards the walls of our stomach, and this is what we call the gastrointestinal disorder called acidity. So whenever this mucus layer becomes irregular or it ruptures, then we suffer from the problem of acidity. In turn, you can know that this mucus is a very important layer. Now we will be dealing with the next. That is, the next part of our alimentary canal, the small intestine. What do you mean by small intestine? And remember, the entry of food through the stomach into the small intestine is caused by a sphincter. Okay, a sphincter, that is a muscular gate, you can say. Sphincter regulates the entry of food from the stomach into your small intestine. So the next what we have is the next part of alimentary canal, small intestine. And regardless of its name, which it is given that it is small intestine, but this is a highly coiled structure and it is very elongated, that it has a maximum length. This small intestine is the longest. Small intestine is the longest part of alimentary canal. Then the next feature of small intestine, this is much developed in herbivores as compared to carnivores. And a question is asked why it is so that small intestine, which is a highly coiled tube-like structure, is very much advanced or much developed in herbivores compared to carnivorous animals, or we can say carnivores. The reason behind this is, in herbivores, you know, herbivores are the animals which consume plant food or which are dependent on plants for their nutrition, while these carnivore animals are the flesh-eating animals. So we know that herbivores which are dependent on plants, and these plants contain high amount of cellulose in them. In turn, these herbivores will attain the nutrition which is high in cellulose concentration, and as a result, to digest this complex macromolecule, that is your cellulose, these herbivores require a longer length of small intestine. And as compared to carnivores, carnivores are the flesh-eating animals, or they are dependent on other animals. And because they are dependent on other animals, they do not have any cellulose content in their diet. And in turn, they require a smaller length or a shorter length small intestine. Then you can say that this small intestine is highly coiled structure. As you can see in the diagram, see, it is highly coiled. And in the inner walls of small intestine, what do you have? See, you have finger-like projections. So we can write the inner wall of small intestine have many, or you can say have numerous finger-like projections, and these finger-like projections are termed as villi. So, the inner wall of small intestine contains many finger-like projections. Can you see in the diagram? We have the coiled structure, and in the inner wall you have such finger or thread-like projections. These projections or outgrowth are called as villi. And what is the function of this villi? This villi increases the surface area for absorption of food. That is, villi increases the surface area required for absorption of food. Required for food absorption. So this is the major function of villi, and because of this, that is the foldings and villi, a larger length of small intestine is packed in such small volume of your body. So this was all about small intestine. Now many important digestive enzymes and other juices are secreted into this small intestine. So let's see. Now we are doing actually the functions of small intestine, that is how this small intestine helps in digestion of food. So what we have is, in this small intestine, while studying its functions, we'll also study liver and pancreas in brief. First of all, we are studying liver. Liver, as I told you, is the largest gland present in the body. Remember, liver is the largest gland. If you are asked what is the largest organ present in body, then the largest organ would be your skin. Because we have discussed earlier that skin covers whole of our body from head to toe. Whereas this liver is not the largest organ, in turn it is the largest gland which is present in your body. So liver is the largest gland. Now this liver secretes bile salts or bile juices. So liver helps in the secretion of bile juice. Now what is the function of this bile juice? This bile juice enters your small intestine. Bile juice enters into small intestine, and then it does a process called emulsification of fat. This is again a very important term, or you can say a very important question for you, that what do you understand by emulsification of fat? Which juice or digestive enzyme is responsible for this emulsification, and from where this bile juice is being secreted? So you have 3 questions in just one concept. Now we know that emulsification of fat is carried out by bile juice, and this bile juice is secreted by the largest gland present in your body, that is liver. Let's see, what do you mean by this term emulsification of fat? In your small intestine, the fats are present in the form of large globules. So what this bile juice does is, it works on these large globules of fat and convert it into smaller globules. Why do we require such conversion of large globules into smaller globules? The reason behind this is, the fats, when they are present in the form of large globules, other enzymes, that is the pancreatic enzymes which is secreted by pancreas, or we can say other enzymes, intestinal juice of your small intestine, cannot work on these large globules. And we know for digestion to occur completely, we need to break down these large globules into simpler forms, which thereby can be absorbed easily by the body. So emulsification of fat is the conversion of large globules of fat which is present in your intestine into small fat globules. And this conversion is done by bile salts, or you can say bile juice. So this is what you have the concept of emulsification of fat, and why this conversion is required I have already told you, because enzymes cannot work on such large globules. So these fat globules need to be converted into smaller globules of fat, so that now enzymes can work upon them and break them into simpler forms. So this you have about account of liver, or you can say about emulsification of fats. Now we say that after studying liver, you have to study the next organ, that is pancreas. So pancreas is again an important organ, but it is not given in detail. So we'll just do the required function of pancreas. We should know here that pancreas secrete pancreatic juice and this pancreatic juice contains a very important enzyme. That is, this pancreatic juice contains the enzyme called trypsin, and this trypsin enzyme helps in digestion of proteins. But now the problem is this: for activation of this trypsin enzyme, you need to have an alkaline medium, or you can say you need a basic medium for the activation or working of this trypsin enzyme. And we knew that when the food comes in from the stomach to the intestine, because in the stomach you have HCl, hydrochloric acid, in turn the food is acidic in nature, and because trypsin requires basic medium, so this bile juice does one function of emulsification of fat. The next function of this bile juice is to provide alkaline medium in the small intestine for activation of trypsin enzyme. So bile juice carries out two functions. One I have already told you. The next you can know that it has the function to provide alkaline medium to activate trypsin enzyme. So these are the two functions of bile juice. So now when alkaline medium would be provided by the bile juice secreted by the liver, this trypsin would get activated and it would help in the digestion of proteins. Here we say that these proteins are now completely being digested, and this whole digestion, that is pancreas secrete pancreatic juice, and this juice is secreted in again the small intestine only. Okay? So pancreas secrete their secretion, that is pancreatic juice, into small intestine. This pancreatic juice contains an enzyme called trypsin. This is the enzyme which is present in pancreatic juice. Now this trypsin requires an alkaline medium. The alkaline medium is provided by what? The bile juice which is secreted from the liver, and now it helps in the digestion of proteins. So in small intestine you have complete digestion, okay? Everything which was partially digested, that is starch, 30% of starch was digested in your buccal cavity. Then next you had certain digestion of proteins, that is partial digestion in the stomach. Now in small intestine we have received the secretions of liver and also the secretion of pancreas. Apart from these secretion, in small intestine the complete digestion occurs. Or first we will study that this small intestine also secretes intestinal juice from its walls. So we have small intestine, it secretes intestinal juice from its walls. And this intestinal juice along with trypsin and the bile juice or bile salts, here now complete digestion occurs. That is, all these secretion work together and completely digest your food or break down your complex incompletely digested food into simpler forms which can be easily absorbed. So here now complete digestion takes place. So if you are asked, tell me the location where no digestion occurs, the answer would be esophagus, that is your food pipe. In food pipe, no kind of digestion occurs, it just transfers your food from the buccal cavity to the stomach. And where complete or maximum digestion occurs, the location is small intestine. And in turn, all the proteins, that is your undigested or partially digested proteins, completely get digested in the small intestine upon the action of pancreatic juice, bile juice and intestinal juice. And these proteins get converted into the simplest forms, which is called amino acids. So what we are writing on the left hand side are your complex, undigested or partially digested material. And as a result of complete digestion, the products which you are getting on the right hand side are the simpler molecules. These are the simpler forms, and in turn these simpler forms are now absorbed by the body. Okay? So proteins are completely digested in small intestine and they get converted into amino acid. Then next you have that carbohydrates, or you can say complex carbohydrate, now get fully completely converted to simpler forms, that is, they undergo complete digestion and they get converted into simpler forms like glucose. This complex carbohydrate molecules get converted to simple sugars, and the example of simple sugars is glucose. And the third digestion which you have is of fats, or you can say lipids. Fats are also known as lipid molecules. So this fat, we have discussed that it undergoes emulsification, but I am talking about the complete digestion. That is conversion of complex molecules into simpler absorbable forms. So these fats are converted to fatty acids and glycerol. And hence these are absorbed by the body. And for absorption, as we have discussed previously, that for absorptions you have finger-like projections, and these finger-like projections present on the internal wall or inner wall of small intestine, these are called villi. So once your complex molecules are converted to simpler forms, what happens? The walls of small intestine having these villi, they absorb all the simple molecules, and then they help in the formation of energy. So this is the process of digestion. Rest we can say that then further all the undigested, or if we have some undigested matter still left, then the food from small intestine passes into this larger intestine. Okay, so in small intestine maximum digestion occurs, and now the undigested food, that is 10 to 12% matter, is now transported to this large intestine. So we say that now the food passes to large intestine. And in large intestine only digestion is not occurring actually in larger intestine. In large intestine only some amount of reabsorption of water and minerals occur. So we say that in large intestine reabsorption of water and some nutrients, or you can say minerals, takes place. So this is what we have the function of large intestine. It is again a coiled tube-like structure, but it is not as coiled as compared to small intestine. Okay? So in large intestine, reabsorption of water and some minerals takes place, and now your food, which is not actually food, the waste material remaining after absorbing all the nutrients from the food, the waste is then excreted out or passed out. Okay, so the waste, that is all the water and essential components we have absorbed, and now we have the waste material which is excreted by the last, that is anus, and this is also governed by a anal sphincter. Like we had a muscular sphincter near our stomach, so similarly we have an anal sphincter, okay, which is regulated. We'll deal with this in higher classes. So this is your digestion of food. We have discussed all the parts of our alimentary canal, that is starting from the mouth to the anus. And now we have discussed the functions, different kinds of enzymes, and the structural role also, structural features of all these parts. So this was an account of digestive system in humans. Now, this was about digestion in humans. The next topic which we'll be starting with, and we'll continue this in our further lectures also, would be about respiration. We'll be starting, what do you mean by the term respiration? So before actually starting this respiration, I want all of you that do you understand the difference between two terms known as breathing and respiration? Because most of the students use these terms in a common general sense. That is, they say breathing and respiration are same processes. And this breathing is the general or common term which we use in our day-to-day language, and respiration becomes a scientific term given to breathing. But no, please clear your doubts now. The terms breathing and respiration are not the same, okay? Respiration we'll be dealing with in the next class. This is your human respiratory system, what you have with you. But before that, let us study the difference between breathing and respiration. So breathing actually involves two processes. That is inhalation, and the next one is exhalation. Inhalation means movement of air from the surroundings into our body or into our lungs. So inhalation means process of movement of air from the external surroundings inside our body. So this you have the process of inhalation, and the next process exhalation means movement of air from the lungs or from the inside to your external environment or external surrounding. So these are the two processes, and these two processes combinedly are called to be involved in breathing. That is, it is just the movement of air from outside to inside and inside to outside. This you have the process of breathing with you. But what do you mean by the term respiration? Respiration, it is the process of breakdown of complex substances. It is the process of breakage or breakdown of complex substances into simpler forms by the use of oxygen. Or you can say respiration is the oxidative breaking. In short, you can say respiration is a type of oxidative breaking of complex materials. That is, when your complex substances get converted to the simple substances or simpler forms in the presence of oxygen. This oxidative breaking or this process of conversion of complex material into simpler material in the presence of oxygen is called respiration. So this is the main difference between breathing and respiration. I hope now you will not use these two terms having a similar meaning, and you have understood the difference. Now you will understand more when we'll be dealing with both these processes. I'll be explaining you the breathing mechanism, that in which conditions or situation inhalation occurs and in which other circumstances exhalation occurs. Then we'll also be dealing with the term respiration. Respiration is the oxidative breakdown of your complex material into simpler forms. So now we'll be dealing with this in the next, and in the next class we'll also see the human respiratory system. In this, we'll be seeing the passage of breathing, that is the passage of air, how this air moves from the external nostrils till the last part, that is your alveoli. So this was all the human digestive system for today. Now we are left with other systems, and we'll be seeing them in the further classes. Thank you for joining the class today. If you have any sort of doubt, you can contact us anytime. Thank you.